The way that we consume the news has changed in recent years. In fact, the primary way that people consume the news is through the internet. And as a result, the coverage covered by the news has changed as well, now pandering to more extreme beliefs and ideologies, which in turn support the most powerful in society. Marx in his work talked about class consciousness, which was later expanded upon by Gramsci. He focused largely on false class consciousness. This is the process where the ruling class install bourgeois norms and values onto the proletariat, and this in turn will prevent revolution from occurring. Herman and Chomsky expand largely on this with the concept of manufacturing consent. This is where mass media in its production of news itself gives only partial information, which in turn supports the US government's policies and prevents any sort of retaliation against these policies. Print media has been shown to be very important in influencing people's opinions, especially when it comes to issues like immigration. So important, in fact, that both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair have both sought the backing of Rupert Murdoch. Cultural discourse has also expanded into several other papers, although the radicalisation from newspapers is somewhat limited due to the amount of regulation of the industry. Conservative media channels have grown rapidly in the past few years, growing increasingly important and increasingly relevant. This new media has been in some ways utilised by the Republican Party to gain more votes. The extent of this can be seen in the 2020 election, where Tucker Carlson fed deliberately into conspiracy theories surrounding election fraud in a way to compete with their competitors OAN and Newsmax. Although smaller, British upstart conservative media companies have become significantly more popular in recent years. Facebook has almost become synonymous with radicalisation, with companies like Cambridge Analytica being able to utilise its ads to both push for the Brexit campaign and get Donald Trump elected. The most significant example of radicalisation, however, comes from Myanmar, where Islamophobic groups were able to organise and then systematically target the Rohingya people. The algorithm itself pushed more racist content, which in turn fueled racial tensions within the country. Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter and transition into X, as an attempt to try and preserve free speech on the platform, has been shown largely to be inaccurate, as he has banned multiple journalists and instead incited hate speech within the platform. Another site which has been synonymous as hate speech is 4chan, which evolved from 2chan, a Japanese site, and then eventually into 8chan as a split-off from 4chan, then 8kun because of its links to terror attacks. Gamergate was an online harassment campaign aimed predominantly at female journalists. This originated on 4chan, though migrated to 8chan later. The fallout of this harassment campaign can still be seen on the internet today, with many content being produced on YouTube focusing primarily on identity politics. Although as previously mentioned, 4chan and 8chan are most synonymous with terror attacks, most notably the Christchurch shooter, who was later turned into almost a martyr by the site, and then later the synagogue shooter. These insular communities in some ways have gone outside of the site themselves and form paramilitary groups such as the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, and the Proud Boys. Samantha Kuttner has outlined how these groups target insular young men, then present themselves as the answers to their issues. The increase in polarization of the media people consume has led to several platforms like the Daily Wire, started by Jeremy Boring, and Ben Shapiro, and PragerU, started by Dennis Prager. Daily Wire, for example, has their own streaming service, BentKey, which in turn produces content specifically for a conservative audience, creating their own form of conservative counterculture. These conservative news outlets will continue to grow, partly a result of people's economic standing, the lack of regulations on the internet itself, and the lack of education on these topics.